Matt, thanks very much for joining us this morning. Now, you're from Trinity Inner South, and you're in a unique position when it comes to church planting, particularly hub church planting, because Trinity Inner South was an extension of Trinity Church, and then you're also involved in hub churching too. So let's begin by saying you're in the process of actually developing a hub church with Karl Forsythe. Where did you start when you were looking for somebody to plant out with? You know, what sort of characteristics were you looking for? What were the things that were upmost in your mind?
Well, Karl started this week actually, so it's an exciting time for us, and we're very thankful to have him here. I guess along with all the normal stuff, I guess we would probably take for granted in Geneva on character and godliness and evangelistic heart. I reckon one of the big things we were looking for were fit with our church and our sort of culture, and also fit with me as a planter, because I think that sort of senior pastor planting church dynamic can be a particularly challenging one, and I was pretty keen for Karl and I to work through that well. So we did a lot of thinking about what was sort of best, given we're at the size now where we would love to plant if we had already had someone on board, so we won't kick Karl out in his first week. But we're sort of thinking, well, what's going to be good for both Trinity Inner South now as we prepare to plant, and hopefully to do that healthily, and what will make for a good plant in a few years' time. So, because really it's a unique challenge to really try and get people to leave a church that hopefully they still love at that point, to go and do something that will be harder and more taxing for the sake of the gospel. So for me, it appears like there's a bit of a tension there. Like sometimes you get someone who could be great for your current church, but find it really hard to plant. So we did a lot of thought on whether that person should be complementary to me or very similar to me. We went for complementary in the end. Karl's got a lot of skills and gifts that I don't have, and hopefully I can teach him a few things as well. So we were really looking for someone who could help grow us in church health and continue to help us grow an evangelistic culture while he's with us, however long that might be. But also we wanted to be confident that people would grow in their love and appreciation for his gifts and trust him, as I said, enough to leave a church and go and start somewhere new in a few years' time. So,
I just wanted to clarify something. Is that the model that you're particularly looking for at present? You know, there are various different types of hub model. So you're looking at a joint team. Is that, and that's why it was so important to make sure that Karl synced with you well? Yeah,
there's lots of different ways to plant a church, and we've only tried one here in Trinity in Adelaide, just for the context we're in, where there's not many evangelical churches around. So our model is tending to plant somewhere like we have, and then in a little while kind of look where we're drawing people from and see if there's an opportunity to actually plant into an area where we're drawing a lot of people from, so that people can work a bit better at connecting with their local community, inviting them to the church down the road rather than the church 20 minutes away. So there's a few places in Adelaide we're looking at in that, and because I think we're up to 8 or so churches now, increasingly when we plant, we'll be sort of leading this plant from Inner South, but there'll be other Trinity churches around who might have people living in that area who might want to join us.
And have you thought?
As well. So.
Have you thought of an arc for the life of the new plant? Is it that it's going to always be sort of like a satellite extension of Trinity in the South, or are you looking forward to a point in which it's going to sort of separate itself and be a separate church?
Yeah, I guess we'd like to, as quickly as we can, and as is wise at the time, actually set it up as a new church with its own leadership team, responsible for its own finances and everything like that. So that's, I guess, our desire. Otherwise, things just kind of grow in increasing complexity for us, sort of managing things. So we're really making it up as we go as the Trinity Network, and working, sort of as best we can. So we have a great partnership in the gospel, and we share resources where it seems sort of prudent and effective too, but also like to give a lot of freedom to the planters to, create a new culture and try and reach a new area in Adelaide, because like every city, there's wealthy parts, there's parts with lots of, new Australian refugees and things like that. It's very diverse, Adelaide, and it's different pockets. So we want churches to kind of actually have quite a lot of decision-making level at the local level, and the rest really is a partnership in the gospel. So we might send them musos for a while, or kids people, or things like that, but the goal is always to try and set them up well to be under their own steam, and we'll enjoy catching up and sort of partnering in the gospel together from further afield, hopefully in the future.
Do you have a notional sense of how long that might take, or is this very much something you're playing according to as it adapts and as it grows?
Yeah, we've been talking with the congregation about 3 years' time. However, we're in the interesting position now where we filled up one service, and about 14 months ago went to 2, and sort of as of the start of this year, they're both effectively full. We can probably squeeze a couple more people in, but so we're feeling like we certainly couldn't wait 3 years to plant a church. So whether we bring it forward on a shorter time frame or start a third service, it's a difficult one to think through, because starting a third service, for example, soaks up energy and effort that could be put into starting a new church plant, which we think is probably going to see the gospel spread more rapidly. Yet Karl's he's an Adelaide boy, but been studying interstate and just returned back. And I think the tension for us is, I think he'd managed the logistics of planting fine. I think it's that relational connection, as I said, to convince people to leave Trinity Inner South and go and do something for the gospel, which I think takes time. So I think that's where the wisdom call is on when you might time a church plant, or you might try and work out something else to enable us to keep growing and reaching more people with the gospel in the meantime. But we're kind of in a position we didn't expect to be in at the moment, and it's a great problem to have, but we just trying to work it out.
Yeah, we're pretty happy. So we're pretty happy with your topic. Problem too. Yeah. Listen, just reflecting back, let's reflect a little back now. You're in that unique position of having been planted out and now planting. In taking in your idea of planting, what are the sort of the key lessons that you've taken from your own experience? What are some of the things that you've thought to yourself, now that we're going out, now we're second generation now, we're going to plant out ourselves. What were the key things that stuck with you that you might share with other people who are thinking, okay, we're a church plant and we're thinking of planting out?
Yeah. I was in it was a great blessing from God. When I was at Bible college, I was able to be part as a sort of student minister involved with planting Trinity Northeast, which is in the northern suburbs of Adelaide, and go and do that for a couple of years. And then I came back into the city again post-college. So I've kind of seen it from a few different angles now, which is really helpful. Probably of all the things you could say, I reckon we're trying to communicate very clearly to our community now that whilst a church plant might be 18, 24 months, 3 years off, we really need to start multiplying everything now. We need more sound people, more kids people, more Bible study leaders, all of those things, because we need a lot of great people to go and a lot of great and well-trained people to stay as well. Because I think probably one of the lessons we've learnt is that the kind of people that come planting and do leave a church where they might be established and connected in with kids in the local community are usually on the sort of, how to say it nicely, the more sort of committed, trained, equipped end. So the plant can often take some of the most involved people.
Yeah, you can say it, Matt. They're not pew sitters. That's what you're basically saying.
No, they're not. Yeah, we're so polite in Adelaide. It's part of our culture. So we've found planting previously, like I think the city, even though it's a really big church, we took out the largest group that we've ever taken planting before. So we're probably about 120 people, including kids, so about 90 on a Sunday, which was the biggest group we've ever sent out planting. But I think, if you spoke to people in the city, they were still feeling it sort of 2.5 years after we left. So, that's always going to be the case, but we're keen to minimise that. And I think you do it by continuing to articulate the vision that we just need to multiply everything to leave behind a healthy church and plant a healthy church.
So let me clarify that for people who are listening in. I'm trying to put this in the perspective of, say, a minister who's thinking to himself, I'd like to be planning out, or we've become too comfortable, or we've stabilised and we really do have opportunities. It is about the culture. You're saying is about developing the culture so there's an expectation, so that constantly you're redeveloping this culture. How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I think 15 years ago when we started planning as a network, I think when you raise church planning, which is the question you're asking for someone perhaps in an established church, you're pretty much selling your people. The question is why would we church plant? You're really starting from scratch, and it takes time to sort of build and sort of create a vision for that. We found sort of 15 years on now that we've done a number, and God's been very kind that them all sort of growing and becoming established and seeing great fruit from that. Now the question has changed. When we announced we were coming from the city to Inner South, all the people in the northwest of Adelaide, which were the other area we were considering, is like, why not? I'm really disappointed you're not coming our way. When are you going to come our way? So the question changes, I think, over time. So for the church considering it for the first time, I think there needs to be work done on sort of creating and recapturing that gospel vision for just wanting to see the gospel go out so much that you're prepared to do anything to make it happen. And Trinity City, for example, was a big regional church drawing people from all over Adelaide. So there's a difference for us. We're a sort of well embedded locally. We draw from a much tighter kind of net of people in local community. So, I think that question does need to be addressed. And then we've faced the issue of that group of very committed people who came with us, tight on theology, very clear on why we're doing it, is now a little less than a third of our existing community. So you do need to keep re-articulating that vision. And I think you have to work hard at keeping that vision for the gospel and church planting as the dominant culture. I think as soon as it becomes kind of optional, I think you'd be a little bit in trouble, because a lot of our growth comes from de-church people reconnecting back into the church. I think it takes time to get people from a position where they weren't going regularly to church planting is the greatest thing about, but which is why I think it's unique. Yeah, you need to keep communicating very clearly. So when we planted first day, our first public service, we prayed for the church that one day we'll hopefully plant. We've continued to do that when we appointed Karl. It was a big opportunity to keep sort of sharing that vision for people. And now we're communicating, okay, we're in a different phase now. We're wanting to plant in a few years' time. And we want to be a healthy church planting, a healthy church. So, because I think with that, particularly that de-churched, new Christians, of which we've got a number, great. There's no convincing, they've benefited in a huge way from church planting. So they're easy to convince. They would jump on every roster under the sun to make it happen. With that de-churched crowd, I think a lot of them come along, they first feel a connection to community. And one of the things I've realised is there's no sort of silver bullet. You can't write the perfect vision document or letter or things to kind of change people's heart. It's only word and prayer ministry in a meaty and sustained way that actually moves people. So there's always that kind of lag effect, which is an interesting sort of dynamic there. But you've just got to, as I said, I think as long as it's the dominant culture that, because I think people come and sort of say, well, church planting, I'm not quite there, but I love it. And it seems like everyone's talking about it. So I'm happy to kind of nod along for a while and, and then you hope over time that people grow.
That's interesting, because it sounds, even as you describe it, to be a very long, hard slog. And right next to it is the other option of just continuing to build up the community where you are locally and staying put, so to speak. Why would you recommend it?
Yep.
Why would you recommend church planting?
I think you just have a greater surface area in the community. We very much, as all gospel-hearted people do, want to see the gospel spread rapidly in our time and in our city. And I think we could work hard at building Adelaide's next great megachurch. Not that we really have too many here, actually, but I think you just have more kind of surface area for the gospel if we're planting sort of local communities where you can invite someone 5 minutes down the road, you're at school, you're in the shops, at the gym, seeing people who are only, 5 minutes away from, a community hall or something like we are at the RSL, where people know it's easy to invite people along to. So we're convinced that is going to see the gospel spread more rapidly. So we've actually geared our whole network that way so that we get network assistance for taking on a planter. If we wanted to take on a second pastor who wasn't going to plant, we would have to come up with that money all ourselves. So we're trying to build it. I mean, you can't systematise everything, but you want the system and your vision to line up. I just think it's a more rapid way to spread the gospel, and times will change when, if we would love in Adelaide for every person to be no more than 10 minutes away from a vibrant, gospel-hearted, evangelical church, which isn't the case at the moment. So we think that's kind of phase one, and then we start to talk about a sort of a phase two of sort of shading, thinking, okay, we're not reaching tradies over there or that Vietnamese community over there. And as our church plants mature and they kind of have planted a number of sort of time, or churches have been planted near them, they're kind of moving on to that sort of phase two at the moment, which might involve some different things that don't look like a traditional church plant, but that the same evangelistic heart and desire to see the gospel spread is very evident. So all about surface area for the gospel, I reckon.